What is that supposed to be? Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to do my first episode of what I call Overthinking Fishing Lures. And more often than not, it's going to be creek fishing lures. So the logical thing to do when you're going to go to a new place to fish, ask the locals, hey, what are the fish biting? Then go buy that particular lure, or particular color, or particular bait, and then go fishing, right? That's the simple solution. Makes sense. But I like to overthink things, you know. The illogical thing to do is just to walk through your local Bass Pro or Walmart and pick whatever you think looks good. Just pick something off the shelf and, oh yeah, that looks good. Buy it and then go fishing with it. What's happened was the fishing lure manufacturers caught you. You were the fish and you bit. So you were, you thought it, I don't know, was nice and shiny or was whatever. You bit the lure. So the illogical thing to do is just to buy whatever you think looks good without thinking about it. The logical thing to do is just to ask what people are using and what's having success and pick that. But in this series, I'm going to overthink it. I'm going to explain my thought processes behind fishing lures, the design of fishing lures, and the overall goal of this series is to take the mountains of fishing lures available to us and shrink it down so our tackle box is really small. And we've thought it through, we've overthought it, and we don't need to bring a million things with us. So that's the point of this series. So the theme for today's episode is lures that don't seem like they would work. And I showed you a beetle spin at the beginning, and here's another custom beetle spin that I've rigged up. I literally took a the larger size beetle spin, put it on a Pond Magic spinnerbait. It works. Beetle spins. So if you're mainly a lake fisherman, you probably have no clue what a beetle spin is, or it's just not something that's right for you. But for those who fish the creeks and rivers, beetle spin's been around a long time, made by Johnson, and it catches fish. So when I was a kid, I fished with my dad and we used live bait. We always dug up night crawlers and fished with worms. And that's the only way that I knew how to fish. He had a few lures in his tackle box, but he never used them. My dad passed away when I was young. I got a little bit older. I kind of got out of fishing, but I decided to get back into fishing, and I really wanted to use artificial lures. And so I did what I mentioned earlier. I went to the store, just whatever I thought looked good, I purchased it. I had no really logic or reasoning behind my purchase. It just looked to me like a fish would bite it. And some of that stuff worked, and a lot of it didn't work. And I began to ask people, like, hey, what do you use to catch bass? Or what do you use to catch goggle eye or, bluegill, whatever the case, crappie? And they would tell me. And a lot of times I would think, that makes sense. Why didn't I think of that? Other times, like on the beetle spin, I'm just thinking, what? Huh? Beetle spin? It looked terrible to me. So something that makes sense is, this is a Rage Swimmer by Strike King. It's a paddle tail swim bait, soft swim bait. That makes sense to me. A grub makes sense to me because it has that little tail on it that has movement as it goes through. A ribbon tail worm made sense to me. It has movement. It catches the fish's eye. Even a tube made sense to me. It doesn't have movement, but it has the shape of a fish or a crawdad. It just looks like something, right? And then I thought of a beetle spin. It has no movement. It's just a little twin-tailed thing that doesn't really move that much. It might move slightly. So I don't really know what it was meant to be at first. When I first saw it, I just did not think it would do any good because it wouldn't move, right? Wouldn't have any spinning action or propelling action. And then I thought, what on earth? Why is it attached to a spinner? Because in theory, you look at a spinner bait like this one here. That's an Indiana blade and a Colorado blade. Most times you have willow leaf blades, and they have a fish shape. And of course, the point of a spinner bait is to give off flash and to use the metal blades for reflection or vibration to get the fish's attention to come to the lure. But you kind of want it to look like something, right? So usually those blades are shaped like a fish. So it kind of looks like a little school of fish, swimming. And then of course the biggest one, the one on the back with maybe silicone strands or a paddle tail grub on it or something, that's the one that the fish, once the fish gets up there, they think, ooh, that's enticing, and they grab that and you've got them hooked. So that kind of makes sense. But when have you ever seen a beetle with a little blade spinning? It made no sense to me. So I immediately thought, no, that's crazy. And I went with my other stuff. And then I go fishing with those people that told me beetle spins work. And I watched them catch 3 times more fish than what I'm catching. So I realized, okay, beetle spins work. So I buy beetle spins and I use them and they work. And then it dawns on me, it's a little crawdad. That little twin thing is just little crawdad pinchers. It's a very small crawdad. It's not a big crawdad, but it's like a little bitty crawdad swimming. If you ever caught and flayed fish from a creek or river, almost every fish has a crawdad in its stomach. It's just their natural prey. So I thought, okay, I get the shape now. It looks like a little crawdad. But when does a crawdad have a little tiny fish following with it that gives off a flash? It makes no sense. But it works. So then I took the beetle spin philosophy and I attached it to a grub, a 2 or 3 inch grub. It worked awesome. Had a little white and a red grub. It was a white grub with a red tail. Attached it to a silver spinner, and it worked great. Then I got a black with a chartreuse tail grub and attached it to a gold spinner. What do you know? It worked great. I even went as far as to get a 6-inch worm and attach it to not a very big spinner. It didn't do great, but I caught fish on it. And I physically saw a massive bass lunge at it one time and missed it, but I saw it. It was only a couple feet from where I was standing. So that didn't work out the greatest, the worm with the spinner, but I still caught some fish on it, and I had a massive bass trying to bite it. So sometimes things that don't make any sense or don't work just work. Like the first time I ever saw a buzzbait, my immediate reaction was, what on earth? Why would a fish go after some monstrosity of metal? That's my first thought. Of course, I talked to my pastor at the time who told me that was his favorite lure of all time. He caught more bass on a buzzbait than anything else. His favorite 3 colors was white, black, and chartreuse. And he told me how to fish it, and I started using them, started catching fish. Went with him one time and watched him catch tons of fish. I caught some. And now it's become my favorite lure of all time. It's the buzzbait. And I'll get back to the buzzbait in episodes that we'll do later about the philosophy behind the buzzbait. Like, what is the buzzbait supposed to be? But obviously it's something dying. It's some little animal dying on top of the water. And bass wants it, I caught bluegill on a buzzbait before. And a buzzbait about this size. Now that's not common, but 2 casts in a row one time I caught big bluegill, which is really odd. Caught a lot of goggle eye, which in Missouri we call them goggle eye. A lot of places are called rock bass. I've caught a lot of those. I've caught a decent amount of green sunfish, or we call them black perch. Of course, a lot of bass. But there's just things that don't make any sense. So in this series, I'm going to be overthinking lures. I'm going to be analyzing them and talking about, do you really need that? Do you not need that? But let me just say, first and foremost, sometimes you can overthink lures, and things that don't make any sense just work. You know, sometimes we think bass or fish are just smarter than they really are. They're instinctual, they're just a predator, they're opportunistic, they're just waiting for something to come by, and they want to be the first fish to get there before the other fish get there to get the meal. And there are days where you can throw something out there and reel it so fast that you think there's no way they even have a chance to see it, and that's what they want that particular day because they're so aggressive. And so sometimes we're overthinking, right? So I want to make that clear from the beginning that I understand that the series I'm overthinking it. And sometimes things that just work and we have no idea why. But it's going to be fun, I think, to really analyze fishing lures, to think about it, and then eventually we can cut our tackle box down to just a very small amount of lures and colors and combinations and things like that, so that we don't have to spend so much money and we can maybe have a little thought process behind it. And of course, the main reason I'm doing it is fun. I just like to think about these things. I enjoy fishing lures. I enjoy thinking about them. And like all things in my life, I enjoy overthinking it. A couple more just real quick examples. These are these are Yum Dingers. These are the Ned Dingers. They're the smaller ones. But whether you're talking about a Cinco or a Yum Dinger or any kind of stick bait, when I first saw it, I thought, no. Because the original worm I used was a ribbon tail worm. And to me that made sense, because as the worm was falling, it had a tail that was spinning. And then as you jigged it and it came up, it would spin its tail, and it just seemed to me that it needed movement, right? And then I started hearing about the Cinco. It's a stick bait. It looks like a stick, but obviously mimics a worm, and its movement is very minimal. What's going on here? So obviously I thought, that's a bad idea. And now in 2022, if you ever watch anyone's video on the greatest lures of all time, it seems to be the best bass catching lure of all time is the Cinco, or the Yum Dinger, the stick bait. It catches more than anybody else. It's an amazing lure. I myself have started using them and I've had lots of success. So we'll get into analyzing why I think they're so good in a future video, but it didn't appear to me like a good idea. One more. The Fluke. Now this is one I haven't actually used a whole lot, but I'd like to test it out and then talk about it on a future video. But everyone who has used Flukes loves them. But every time I look at them, I say, ooh, that's a terrible looking lure. No one's fish gonna bite that. And the fish love them. So it just goes to show you, don't go by what you think, go by results. So this is just the first installment of this new series. I love to talk about fishing lures. I really do. And I love to overthink it. But I do think you're actually gonna, I think my overthinking will bring us to some pretty cool conclusions and be able to kind of summarize lures. And once again, take our mountains of fishing lures, an entire room full that we don't need and we don't ever use, and now we wish we could sell them because they're, you know, obsolete. We can shrink that down to just a small tackle box or just a small tackle bag, and we can know that we have the greatest lures of all time, and we've whittled it and narrowed it down to just those select few. So that's what this series is going to be about. I hope you find it interesting. And until next time, take care.